The Henderson family arrived at the mansion just as the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. The grandeur of the old Victorian structure stood out against the rolling hills, its ivy-covered walls and gabled roof giving it an almost fairy tale appearance. As they drove up the long, winding driveway, the excitement was palpable. "Look at this place," Alex Henderson exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. "Can you believe we got it for such a good price?" His wife, Sarah, smiled, though she couldn't shake the slight unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach since they'd first seen the mansion. "It's beautiful," she agreed, her eyes lingering on the shadowy corners of the estate. "But a bit eerie, don't you think?" In the back seat, their two children, Emily and Max, pressed their faces against the windows, their youthful excitement untainted by any foreboding. "Dad, do you think there's a secret room?" Max asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Maybe," Alex chuckled. "There's only one way to find out." They parked the car and stepped out, the cool evening air carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The mansion loomed over them, its windows dark and silent like eyes observing their every move. Sarah shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. "Let's get inside and take a look around," she suggested, her voice betraying a hint of urgency. The front door creaked open with a long, mournful groan, revealing a grand foyer lit by a massive crystal chandelier. Dust motes danced in the light as they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. "Wow," Emily breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's like a palace." Sarah ran her fingers along the banister of the sweeping staircase, her touch leaving a trail in the thick layer of dust. "It needs some cleaning, but it's got potential," she said, trying to keep her tone light. They spent the next few hours exploring the mansion, discovering room after room filled with antique furniture covered in white sheets. Each room seemed to tell a story of its own, remnants of a bygone era frozen in time. In the library, Sarah found herself drawn to a portrait hanging above the fireplace. The painting depicted a stern-looking couple, their eyes seeming to follow her no matter where she stood. She read the brass plaque beneath the portrait. Jonathan and Eliza Blackwood, 1873. Who were they? She wondered aloud, feeling a chill run down her spine. "Probably the original owners," Alex replied, joining her. "Looks like they were pretty well off." "Do you think they're still around?" Emily asked, her voice small. "Of course not, sweetheart," Alex reassured her. "They're long gone." As night fell, they settled into their new home, exhaustion from the day's activities quickly setting in. After a simple dinner of sandwiches and soup, they retreated to their respective rooms, eager to get a good night's sleep. But as the house settled into the quiet of the night, strange sounds began to emerge. The creaking of floorboards, the faint whisper of the wind through the cracks in the windows, and an almost imperceptible murmuring that seemed to come from the very walls. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that they were not alone. She turned to Alex, who was already asleep, his soft snores providing a comforting rhythm. She tried to close her eyes, but the unease gnawed at her, growing stronger with each passing minute. Down the hall, Emily woke with a start. She had dreamed of a woman standing by her bed, watching her with sad, hollow eyes. She glanced around her dark room, her heart pounding in her chest. It was just a dream, she told herself. Just a dream. But as she lay back down, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her from the shadows. The next morning, the Henderson family awoke to a crisp, clear day. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow over the mansion's interior. Despite the beautiful weather, a sense of unease lingered in the air, unnoticed by everyone except Sarah. Over breakfast, the family discussed their plans for the day. "I think we should start cleaning up and unpacking," Sarah suggested, her voice calm but firm. "This place needs a lot of work." Alex nodded in agreement. "I'll tackle the yard. It's a jungle out there," he said with a grin. "Sarah, you and the kids can start inside." Emily and Max groaned but complied, eager to explore more of the mansion despite their chores. The day was spent in a flurry of activity. Sarah dusted and polished the old furniture, uncovering the beauty beneath years of neglect. Emily and Max busied themselves with sorting through boxes and cleaning their new rooms. As she cleaned, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every now and then, she would catch a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of her eye. But when she turned to look, there was nothing there. By late afternoon, Sarah decided to take a break. She walked into the kitchen, hoping to find some solace in a cup of tea. As she reached for the kettle, a sudden chill enveloped her. The room temperature dropped noticeably, and she could see her breath fogging the air. The door to the pantry creaked open on its own, revealing a dark, shadowy interior. Heart-pounding, Sarah stepped back. She heard a faint whisper like someone calling her name. "Sarah." The voice was soft, almost pleading. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The only response was the silence of the empty kitchen and the creak of the house settling. Meanwhile, outside, Alex was clearing away the overgrown bushes and weeds when he stumbled upon an old, weathered gravestone hidden beneath the foliage. Brushing away the dirt, he revealed the inscription, "In memory of Jonathan Blackwood, 1,830 to 1,885 inches. A chill ran down his spine as he realized he was standing in the midst of an overgrown family cemetery. Inside, Emily and Max were organizing their rooms when Emily found an old, tattered diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She opened it to the first page, the handwriting elegant yet faded. As she read, a sense of dread settled over her. "Emily, come help me with this box," Max called from the hallway. "Just a minute," she replied, unable to tear her eyes away from the diary. The entry she was reading described a series of strange and tragic events that befell the Blackwood family. As she read further, the words seemed to blur, and a sudden headache made her close the book. Dinner that night was a subdued affair. Sarah and Alex exchanged worried glances, both reluctant to share their eerie experiences with the children. Emily was unusually quiet, her mind preoccupied with the contents of the diary. After dinner, Alex decided to address the family. "I found something in the yard today," he began, his tone serious. "There's an old cemetery out back. Looks like the Blackwood family is buried there." Sarah's eyes widened. "That explains a lot," she muttered under her breath. Emily looked up from her plate, her face pale. "I found a diary," she said softly. "It belonged to Eliza Blackwood. She wrote about strange things happening here, before they died." A heavy silence fell over the table as the implications of Emily's words sank in. The family retired to their rooms early, the weight of the day's discoveries pressing down on them. That night, the mansion seemed to come alive with eerie sounds. Footsteps echoed in the empty hallways, whispers filled the air, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Sarah lay awake, her mind racing. She could hear the distant murmur of voices, indistinct but persistent. Emily woke again to the feeling of being watched. This time she saw the ghostly figure more clearly. The woman stood at the foot of her bed, her eyes filled with sorrow. Emily wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The apparition slowly faded, leaving Emily trembling and drenched in cold sweat. Down the hall, Max tossed and turned, plagued by nightmares of shadowy figures and cold, clammy hands reaching out to him. He woke up gasping for breath, his heart racing. In their room, Alex and Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching their door. The handle turned slowly, but no one was there when Alex flung it open. The hallway was empty, but the sense of an unseen presence was overwhelming. As the clock struck midnight, the mansion fell silent once more, leaving the Hendersons to grapple with their fear and uncertainty. They had come seeking a fresh start, but it was becoming clear that the mansion held secrets that were not ready to be laid to rest. The following morning, the Henderson family gathered in the kitchen, each member visibly worn from a night of restless sleep. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken fears, and even the bright morning sunlight streaming through the windows couldn't dispel the lingering unease. "We need to find out more about this place," Alex said, breaking the silence. "We can't keep ignoring what's happening here." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I think we should start at the local library. There has to be more information about the Blackwoods in this mansion." Leaving Max and Emily to explore the mansion and keep busy, Alex and Sarah drove to the nearby town. The library was a quaint old building, its shelves filled with dusty tomes and records. They approached the librarian, a kindly elderly woman named Mrs. Whitaker. "We recently moved into the old Blackwood mansion," Sarah began. "We were hoping to find some information about its history and the family who lived there." Mrs. Whitaker's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and concern. "The Blackwood mansion, you say? The place has quite a dark history. Follow me. I'll show you what we have." She led them to a section filled with local history books and old newspapers. Alex and Sarah spent hours poring over the documents, uncovering a series of tragic and mysterious events linked to the Blackwood family. The Blackwoods had been a wealthy and influential family in the late 19th century. Jonathan Blackwood was a successful businessman, and his wife, Eliza, was known for her beauty and charitable work. They had 2 children, Abigail and Thomas. The mansion, a symbol of their status, was the site of numerous grand parties and gatherings. But the family's fortune took a dark turn. In 1885, Jonathan Blackwood was found dead under mysterious circumstances in his study. The cause of death was never determined, but rumors of foul play and curses began to circulate. Not long after, Eliza became reclusive, withdrawing from society and refusing visitors. Her erratic behavior fueled speculation that she was descending into madness. The final blow came a year later when both Abigail and Thomas fell gravely ill and died within weeks of each other. Eliza, overcome with grief, reportedly took her own life, leaving the mansion abandoned and shrouded in sorrow. "Do you believe in ghosts, Mrs. Whitaker?" Sarah asked quietly as they sifted through the documents. The librarian looked up, her expression serious. "I've heard many stories about that mansion over the years. People say the Blackwood's spirits are restless, unable to move on. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that place has a heavy aura." Back at the mansion, Emily and Max continued their exploration. They ventured into the attic, a dusty, cluttered space filled with old trunks and forgotten treasures. Emily opened one of the trunks, uncovering a collection of letters and photographs. "Look at this!" she called to Max. "These must be from the Blackwoods." Max joined her, peering over her shoulder. The letters, written in elegant cursive, revealed snippets of the family's life, their joys, and their sorrows. One letter in particular caught Emily's attention. It was addressed to Eliza, written by a close friend. My dearest Eliza, I am deeply troubled by the recent events at your home. The air feels heavy with something sinister, and I fear for your safety. Please take care. As they read, the attic grew colder. Emily shivered, feeling a presence close by. She turned, expecting to see Max, but he was on the other side of the room. A shadow flickered in the corner and the whispering started again, a low, mournful sound. "Max, we need to go," Emily said, her voice trembling. Max nodded, sensing her fear. They hurried down the attic stairs, the feeling of being watched intensifying with each step. They decided to wait for their parents in the relative safety of the living room. When Alex and Sarah returned, they found Emily and Max huddled together on the couch, their faces pale. "We found out a lot about the Blackwoods," Alex said, sitting down beside them. He recounted the tragic history they had uncovered, their words confirming the children's own unsettling experiences. "We found letters and pictures in the attic," Emily added, her voice shaking. "There's something wrong with this place. I keep hearing whispers, and I feel like we're being watched." The family sat in silence, the weight of the mansion's dark history pressing down on them. They had sought answers, but the knowledge only deepened their sense of dread. "We need to figure out what the spirits want," Sarah said finally. "We can't keep living like this. If the Blackwoods spirits are still here, maybe there's something we can do to help them move on." Determined to uncover the truth and put the spirits to rest, the Hendersons steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. The haunted history of the mansion was becoming their present reality, and they had to find a way to confront it before it consumed them all. That night, the mansion seemed more oppressive than ever. Shadows lurked in every corner, and the whispers had grown louder, echoing through the hallways like distant, mournful cries. The Hendersons gathered in the living room, the fire crackling in the hearth providing a small measure of comfort against the encroaching darkness. "I think we should sleep in the same room tonight," Alex suggested, his voice strained. "At least until we figure out what's going on." Sarah agreed, and they set up makeshift beds in the living room. As the family settled down, a heavy silence fell over them, broken only by the occasional pop and hiss of the fire. Hours passed, and the house seemed to settle into an uneasy calm. But as the clock struck midnight, Emily woke with a start. She felt an icy chill wash over her, and the air seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. She looked around, her eyes widening in terror, as she saw a ghostly figure standing at the edge of the room. The woman was dressed in a long, flowing gown, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. Emily recognized her from the description she had read in the diary. It was Eliza Blackwood. The spirit's gaze was fixed on Emily, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. "Mom! Dad!" Emily screamed, her voice breaking the heavy silence. Sarah and Alex jolted awake, their eyes widening as they saw the apparition. Max clung to his mother, his face pale with fear. "Who are you?" Alex demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The spirit of Eliza raised a hand, pointing towards the portrait hanging above the fireplace, the same portrait that had unnerved Sarah when they first arrived. Her finger then moved to the diary Emily had found, lying on the coffee table. "She's trying to tell us something," Sarah whispered, her fear giving way to a desperate need to understand. Eliza's spirit flickered, and for a moment, the room grew impossibly cold. Then she vanished, leaving the family in stunned silence. "We need to read the diary," Emily said, her voice trembling but determined. They gathered around the coffee table, Emily opening the diary to the page she had been reading earlier. By the light of the fire, she read aloud, her voice steadying as she went on. April 17th, 1885. Jonathan has been acting strangely. He says he feels a presence in the house, something dark and malevolent. I've tried to comfort him, but I feel it too. I fear for our safety." As Emily continued reading, the entries grew more and more disturbing. Jonathan's behavior became increasingly erratic, and Eliza wrote of seeing shadowy figures and hearing voices that seemed to come from nowhere. The final entry was dated just days before Eliza's death. May 5th, 1886. Abigail and Thomas are gone. I can't bear it. The darkness has taken them, and I fear it will take me too. To whoever finds this, please, put our spirits to rest. We are trapped, bound by the darkness that resides within these walls. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she closed the diary. She was asking for help. They all were. "We need to find out what this darkness is," Alex said, his voice resolute. "It's the key to everything." The next morning, Sarah suggested they contact a medium, someone who could help them communicate with the spirits and uncover the truth. Reluctantly, Alex agreed, and they made arrangements to bring a medium to the house. The medium, a woman named Evelyn, arrived that afternoon. She was a tall, slender figure with a calm demeanor that belied the intensity of her work. As she entered the mansion, she paused, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. "This place is heavy with restless spirits," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The Blackwoods are trapped here, bound by a dark force. We need to perform a seance to communicate with them and understand what is keeping them here." As dusk fell, the Hendersons gathered in the dining room with Evelyn. The medium placed candles around the room and set up a small table with a crystal ball in the center. They joined hands, forming a circle, and Evelyn began to chant softly, her eyes closed in concentration. The air grew colder, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls. The room filled with a palpable tension as Evelyn continued her chant. Suddenly, the crystal ball glowed with an otherworldly light, and a cold wind swept through the room. "I am calling upon the spirits of the Blackwood family," Evelyn intoned. "Jonathan, Eliza, Abigail, Thomas. If you can hear me, please come forth and speak." The crystal ball pulsed, and the wind grew stronger. A faint, whispering voice filled the room, and the candles flickered wildly. "We are here," the voice said, echoing from all directions. "Help us, please." Evelyn's eyes snapped open, and she looked directly at Sarah. "They're here. They're trying to communicate. We need to ask them what happened." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "Eliza, what happened to you and your family? What is this darkness that holds you here?" The voice grew louder, filled with anguish. "The darkness. It came from the shadows. It took Jonathan, drove him mad. It took our children. It feeds on fear and despair. It won't let us go." Evelyn's expression hardened. "We need to find the source of this darkness and banish it. Only then can the Blackwood spirits be freed." The seance ended, and the room returned to its normal temperature. The Hendersons were left with more questions than answers, but they now had a clear goal: to uncover the dark force that held the Blackwoods captive and to find a way to banish it once and for all. The mansion's secrets were slowly unraveling, and the Hendersons knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with danger and fear. But they were determined to see it through, to free the spirits of the Blackwood family and reclaim their home from the darkness. The days following the seance were fraught with tension. The Hendersons continued their daily routines, but the mansion's oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on their minds. The once exciting adventure of moving into a historic home had turned into a waking nightmare. Alex was the first to show signs of strain. He woke one night drenched in sweat, his dreams filled with visions of shadowy figures and the face of Jonathan Blackwood, twisted in madness. He sat up, gasping for breath, the walls of the room seeming to close in around him. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, waking to the sound of his distress. Alex rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the lingering terror of the dream. "I'm fine," he lied, his voice unconvincing. "Just a bad dream." But the dreams persisted, growing more vivid and terrifying each night. Alex began to dread sleep, his waking hours plagued by an overwhelming sense of dread. He found himself drawn to Jonathan's study, the room where the former owner had met his mysterious end. The air in the study was heavy with an unseen presence, and Alex often found himself standing before the desk, lost in a trance-like state. Sarah, too, was struggling. The whispers she had heard in the kitchen grew louder and more insistent, following her throughout the house. They called her name, begging for help, but when she turned to look, she found only empty air. She began to see fleeting shadows in her peripheral vision, disappearing the moment she tried to focus on them. One evening, as she prepared dinner, the kitchen knife slipped from her hand, narrowly missing her foot. She stood frozen, staring at the knife lying on the floor, a chill running down her spine. She could have sworn she felt a hand guiding hers, forcing her to drop the knife. Emily and Max were not immune to the mansion's influence either. Max became increasingly withdrawn, spending hours in his room with the door closed. When Sarah checked on him, she found him sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the wall. He muttered to himself, words she couldn't quite make out. Emily's encounters with Eliza's spirit grew more frequent. The ghostly woman appeared almost nightly, her presence both comforting and terrifying. Emily felt a strange connection to Eliza, a pull that she couldn't explain. She began to seek out the spirit, hoping to understand what she wanted. One night, Emily decided to confront Eliza. She stayed awake, waiting for the familiar chill that signaled the ghost's arrival. When Eliza appeared, Emily sat up, her heart pounding. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What do you need from us?" Eliza's ghostly form flickered, her eyes filled with sorrow. "The darkness binds us," she whispered. "You must find its source and destroy it. Only then will we be free." The next day, Emily shared her encounter with her family. They sat around the dining table, the weight of their predicament pressing down on them. "We need to find out what this darkness is," Emily said, her voice determined. "Eliza said it's the key to freeing their spirits." Alex nodded, though his eyes were hollow with exhaustion. "We've been through the library, the study, the attic. There has to be something we've missed." Sarah suddenly remembered the hidden room in the basement. "What about the basement? We haven't thoroughly explored it." The family decided to investigate the basement that evening. They descended the creaking stairs, flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The air was damp and cold, the scent of mold and decay heavy in their nostrils. They found the hidden room behind a false wall, just as Sarah had remembered. Inside, the walls were lined with strange symbols and writings, remnants of a ritual long forgotten. In the center of the room stood an old, ornate mirror, its surface dark and foreboding. "This must be it," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "The source of the darkness." As they stepped closer, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The mirror's surface began to ripple, and a shadowy figure emerged, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You should not have come here," the figure hissed, its voice echoing in the small space. "This place belongs to the darkness." The family stepped back, fear gripping their hearts. The shadowy figure moved closer, its form shifting and writhing. "We have to destroy it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her terror. "It's the only way to free the Blackwoods." Alex nodded, reaching for a heavy candlestick on a nearby shelf. He swung it at the mirror with all his strength, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. The shadowy figure let out a piercing scream, dissolving into the darkness as the mirror broke. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly. The family stood in the wreckage, breathing heavily, the weight of their ordeal settling on their shoulders. "It's not over yet," Emily said, her voice determined. "We need to make sure the darkness is truly gone. We have to finish this." The Hendersons knew that their journey was far from over, but they had taken the first step towards freeing the Blackwoods and reclaiming their home from the darkness. With renewed determination, they prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, ready to face whatever horrors the mansion still held. The next morning, the air in the mansion felt lighter, as if the act of breaking the mirror had lifted some of the darkness that had weighed them down. The Henderson family gathered in the kitchen, their spirits cautiously optimistic. "We're making progress," Alex said, though dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. "But we need to keep pushing. There's still more to uncover." Sarah nodded, her hand resting on the diary they had been studying. "Eliza mentioned a darkness that binds them. We've disrupted it, but I don't think it's gone completely." They decided to call the medium, Evelyn, again, hoping she could provide more insight. When Evelyn arrived, she took one look at the family and knew something significant had happened. "I can feel a change," she said as she walked through the front door. "But the presence is still here. We need to dig deeper." Evelyn led the family back to the hidden room in the basement. The broken mirror lay in shards on the floor, but the symbols on the walls still pulsed with a faint, sinister energy. Evelyn inspected the symbols closely, her fingers tracing the lines. "This is a binding ritual," she explained. "Whoever performed this was trying to trap something here, something malevolent. Breaking the mirror weakened it, but we need to complete the ritual to banish it for good." Evelyn instructed them to gather certain items, candles, salt, and a piece of iron. She explained that they would use these to create a protective circle and perform a cleansing ritual. As they prepared, the mansion grew colder, and the whispers intensified. The walls seemed to close in on them, and a sense of impending doom filled the air. That evening, they returned to the basement. Evelyn arranged the candles in a circle around the room's center, sprinkling salt along the outer edge and placing the piece of iron in the middle. She motioned for the family to join her inside the circle. "Once we begin, do not leave the circle no matter what happens," she warned. "This entity will try to frighten and distract us, but we must stay focused." Evelyn began chanting in a language none of them understood. The air grew heavy, and the shadows around them seemed to come alive, swirling and writhing. The entity's presence became palpable, a dark, oppressive force pressing down on them. As Evelyn's chant grew louder, the shadows coalesced into a figure, tall and menacing, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The entity lashed out, but it couldn't penetrate the circle. Instead, it spoke, its voice a low, guttural hiss. "You cannot banish me," it snarled. "I am bound to this place, and you will all suffer as the Blackwoods did." Emily stepped forward, her voice steady. "Why are you here? What do you want?" The entity's eyes fixed on her, filled with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I was summoned by Jonathan Blackwood. He sought power beyond his understanding. In his greed, he bound me to this place, but he could not control me. I took his life and those of his family, and now I feed on their despair." Sarah's eyes widened in realization. Jonathan was responsible for this. He unleashed this darkness. Evelyn continued her chant, the entity's form flickering as if struggling to maintain its shape. "We can end this," she said between chants. "We can free the Blackwoods and banish this entity, but we must stay strong." The entity let out a deafening roar, the walls of the basement shaking violently. The candles flickered, threatening to go out, but Evelyn's voice rose above the chaos, steady and unwavering. The family held hands, drawing strength from each other. As the ritual reached its climax, the entity's form began to dissolve, its screams echoing through the mansion. The oppressive force lifted, and the air became lighter, the sense of dread dissipating. Evelyn collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," she said weakly. "The entity is banished. The Blackwood spirit should be at peace now." The Hendersons helped her to her feet, gratitude and relief washing over them. They returned to the living room, where they felt the change immediately. The whispers were gone, and the mansion, though still old and creaky, no longer felt haunted. That night, Emily had a final encounter with Eliza's spirit. The ghost appeared at the foot of her bed, but this time there was no sorrow in her eyes, only gratitude. "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "We are free now. Live your lives without fear." Emily watched as Eliza's spirit faded into the night, a sense of peace settling over her. She knew that the Blackwood family had finally found rest, and so had the Hendersons. The next morning, the family gathered for breakfast, the first truly peaceful meal they had shared since moving in. They talked about their plans for the future, their bond stronger for the ordeal they had endured together. As they looked around the mansion, they no longer saw a house haunted by its past, but a home filled with new possibilities. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to create new memories within its walls. The morning after the seance felt like a fresh start for the Henderson family. The air was lighter, the mansion seemed less foreboding, and the oppressive presence they had lived with for weeks had lifted. However, they knew that the journey wasn't entirely over. Alex, Sarah, Emily, and Max gathered in the living room, still reeling from the previous night's events. "We need to make sure every corner of this house is explored," Alex said, determined. "We've missed something. We need to find it and ensure the darkness is truly gone." Sarah nodded. "The diary mentioned something about a hidden room. We've checked the basement and attic, but there could be another room somewhere." Max chimed in. "What if there's a secret passage or a hidden door? They always have those in old houses like this." Encouraged by their newfound resolve, the family split up to search the mansion. Alex and Sarah took the first floor, while Emily and Max explored the second floor and attic again. Hours passed with no significant discoveries. It wasn't until Emily, poking around the attic, noticed something odd. One of the wooden panels on the wall sounded hollow when she tapped it. She called Max over, and together they managed to pry the panel loose, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Dad! Mom!" Emily shouted, her voice echoing in the attic. Alex and Sarah rushed upstairs, their hearts pounding with anticipation. When they saw the hidden staircase, they exchanged a look of both excitement and apprehension. "Let's see where this leads," Alex said, grabbing a flashlight. The staircase was narrow and steep, covered in dust and cobwebs. They descended cautiously, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room filled with old furniture and boxes. It seemed like a forgotten storage space, but something felt off. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, landing on a large, ornate chest in the corner. "That looks important," she said, pointing to it. Alex approached the chest and opened it, revealing a collection of old journals, letters, and a small, intricately carved box. He picked up one of the journals, blowing off the dust, and began to read aloud. January 3rd, 1885. The ritual is complete. The entity is bound to the mirror, but the darkness has taken root in the house. I fear for my family's safety. If something happens to me, whoever finds this must destroy the mirror and perform the cleansing ritual. This must be Jonathan Blackwood's journal, Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. He documented everything. They continued reading, learning about Jonathan's desperate attempts to control the dark force he had summoned. He had bound the entity to the mirror, but the ritual had gone wrong, and the darkness had spread throughout the mansion. The intricately carved box in the chest caught Emily's attention. She opened it, revealing a set of ritual tools, a small dagger, candles, and a piece of parchment covered in strange symbols. This must be what we need to finish the cleansing ritual, Emily said, holding up the parchment. Alex nodded, a sense of determination filling him. We need to do this tonight. We can't take any chances. That evening, the Hendersons gathered in the hidden room. They set up the candles and arranged the tools according to the instructions on the parchment. The air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding filled the room, but they pressed on. Evelyn had left them with some guidance on performing rituals, and they followed her instructions closely. As they chanted the incantations, the symbols on the parchment began to glow, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The mansion reacted to their actions. The walls creaked, and the whispers returned, louder and more desperate than before. But the family held firm, their voices steady and united. As they reached the climax of the ritual, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles. The temperature plummeted, and the darkness seemed to close in on them. For a moment, they feared they had failed. Then, a brilliant light erupted from the parchment, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. The oppressive force that had plagued them dissipated, and the air grew still and calm. "It's over," Alex said, his voice filled with relief. "We did it." The family returned to the living room, exhausted but triumphant. The mansion felt different, lighter, and truly free of the dark presence that had haunted them. As they sat together, they knew that they had not only freed the spirits of the Blackwood family, but had also reclaimed their home. The hidden room had revealed the final pieces of the puzzle, and now the Hendersons could finally begin to heal and build a new life in the mansion, free from the shadows of the past. Despite their success in the hidden room, the Hendersons remained vigilant. The house felt lighter, but an uneasy silence suggested their ordeal wasn't entirely over. They gathered in the living room, determined to ensure the mansion was completely free of the darkness that had plagued them. "There's still something we're missing," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "The darkness may be weakened, but it's not gone." "We need to confront it directly," Alex agreed. "We've done everything we can to weaken its hold. Now we need to banish it once and for all." Emily suggested they return to Jonathan's study, where the entity had first taken hold. They made their way to the study, the air growing colder with each step. The room was dark and foreboding, the shadows seeming to pulse with the life of their own. "This is where it began," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We need to finish it here." Alex, Sarah, Emily, and Max formed a circle in the center of the room, holding hands. They began the cleansing ritual once more, their voices steady despite their fear. The room grew colder, the shadows growing more intense, as if the darkness was resisting their efforts. Suddenly, the entity appeared before them, a towering figure of shadows and malice. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its voice echoed through the room. You think you can banish me? It snarled. I am bound to this place. You cannot defeat me. We can and we will, Alex said, his voice filled with conviction. We won't let you torment this family any longer. The entity lashed out, its shadowy form swirling around them, but the protective circle held. The family continued the ritual, their voices rising in unison. The entity screamed in rage, its form flickering and wavering. Keep going, Sarah urged, her grip tightening on Alex's hand. As they chanted, the room filled with a brilliant light, pushing back the darkness. The entity's form began to dissolve, its screams echoing through the mansion. The light grew brighter, filling every corner of the room, until the entity was nothing more than a wisp of shadow. With a final, desperate cry, the entity vanished, leaving the room filled with a warm, golden light. The oppressive presence that had plagued the mansion was gone, replaced by a sense of peace and calm. It's over, Emily whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. We did it. The family embraced, their ordeal finally at an end. They had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. As they left the study, they noticed a change in the mansion. The air was lighter, the rooms brighter, and the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over them was gone. The spirits of the Blackwood family had been freed, and the mansion was truly their home. The Hendersons spent the following days cleaning and restoring the mansion, reclaiming it as their own. They found joy in the small moments, the laughter of children playing in the garden, the warmth of a family meal, the comfort of a peaceful night's sleep. One evening, as they sat around the dining table, Emily spoke up. I saw Eliza's spirit last night. She thanked us for freeing them. They're at peace now. Sarah smiled, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. We did the right thing. We honored their memory and gave them the peace they deserved. Alex nodded, his heart swelling with pride. And we've created a home where we can build new memories, free from the shadows of the past. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the mansion, the Henderson family knew they had overcome great darkness. They had faced their fears, confronted the unknown, and emerged stronger for it. The mansion, once a place of sorrow and despair, was now a home filled with love, hope, and new beginnings. Despite the tranquility that had settled over the mansion, a lingering unease remained. The Hendersons had succeeded in banishing the entity and freeing the Blackwood spirits, but there was still a decision to be made. Should they stay in the mansion and embrace the new beginning they had fought for, or should they leave, escaping the memories of their ordeal? The family gathered in the living room, the fire casting a warm, comforting light. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. We've been through so much, Sarah began, her voice gentle. This place holds a lot of memories, both good and bad. But it's also our home now. Alex nodded, considering her words. We've faced the darkness and won. We've made this place our own. But it's also a reminder of what we went through. Emily and Max exchanged a glance. Then Emily spoke up. I think we should stay. We've put so much into this house and we've made it a home. We can create new memories here, happy ones. Max nodded in agreement. Yeah, we've done a lot to make this place better. It feels like we've earned the right to stay. Alex smiled, pride swelling in his chest. You're right. We've worked hard to reclaim this mansion. We shouldn't let the past drive us away. Sarah reached out and took Alex's hand. Then it's settled. We stay. We embrace this new beginning and make the most of it. The family spent the next few days finalizing their decision, making plans for the future. They contacted contractors to help with the restoration, ensuring the mansion would be safe and comfortable for years to come. As they settled into their new routine, the mansion became a place of joy and laughter. The memories of their ordeal faded, replaced by the warmth of family and the comfort of home. They embraced their new life, knowing they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. The Hendersons had not only survived, but had thrived, turning a house of horrors into a home filled with love and hope. The mansion stood as a testament to their resilience and courage, a place where they could build a future free from fear. In the end, they chose to embrace their new beginning, confident in their ability to overcome any challenge that came their way. The ghostly mansion had been transformed, and so had the Henderson family. They were ready to face whatever the future held, together,